everyone. Today we are doing My Math lesson 6.6. Our objective for today, I will be able to multiply decimals by powers of 10. Please have your notebook and your My Math book ready. All right, let's take some notes. Today we are multiplying decimals by powers of 10. To multiply a decimal number by 10, 100, 1,000, or 10 to the second power, 10 to the third power, etc., these are powers of 10, you move the decimal point to the right a certain number of times. I'm going to show you how to determine how many times you move that decimal point to the right. Let's look at our first example. 5 34/100 times 100. Similar to when we multiplied whole numbers by powers of 10, the power of 10 tells us how many, in this case, times we move the decimal point to the right. We can't just add zeros like we did with whole numbers. Because we already have a number with decimal values, adding zeros to the end won't change the value of that number. In my power of 10, I have 2 zeros. That means with 2 zeros, I move 2 times to the right because I'm multiplying. So in our decimal 5 and 34/100, I need to take my decimal point, move it to the right 2 times. Once puts it behind the 3. Twice puts it behind the 4. So it no longer lives between the 5 and the 3, it lives at the end of the 4. When a decimal point lives all the way to the right of a number, and there's no other digits afterwards, it's a whole number. So 5 34/100 times 100 is 534. Our decimal point is hanging out after the 4, but we typically don't write it there if there's no other decimal values after. Let's look at another example. 18 1/10 times 10 to the third power. For our power of 10 this time, we're using a base 10 with an exponent. Just like with whole numbers, the exponent gives us direction. But again, it's not how many zeros to add to our other number, because it would not change the value. It's how many times we move the decimal point. So 3 times to the right. So when I have my decimal, 18 1/100, well, when I move my decimal point to the right, I need to move it 3 times, but I can see I only have 1 digit after the decimal point. So what is that magic number that we can write at the end of a decimal that doesn't change the value? Zeros. So I'm just going to build in a few zeros so that I can see where I'm moving that decimal point, because we need to move it 3 times. So here we go. Once puts it behind the 1, twice, and 3 times. That is the new location of the decimal point. It's no longer between the 18 and the 1. I really don't need these 2 zeros anymore because they're zeros and there's no other digits after my decimal point. So they were just extra. I don't need them. So 18 1/10 times 10 to the third power is 18100. Okay, it's a whole number because there's no other digits that are not 0 after my decimal point. So now I count 3 spaces to give my comma, 1, 2, 3, comma, and 18 1/10 times 10 to the third power is 18,100. All right, let's switch over to our My Math books. We are on page 411, multiplying decimals by powers of 10. In our first example, Josh will need to make 10 payments of $32.25 to purchase a new skim board. What is the total cost of the skim board? So we are finding $32.25 times 10. In your book, they've gone ahead and shown you the actual computation, okay, the multiplication to figure out that problem. As you can see, one of the steps includes a bunch of zeros because we're multiplying by a zero. Kind of a waste of time. But you can see that if we think of our rule for multiplying with decimals, we had 2 decimals in our problem and we needed 2 in our answer. Now let's just prove that moving the decimal point to the right a certain number of times gives us the same answer. So multiplying a decimal by 10 moves the decimal point 1 place because of 1 0 to the right. And when I take my $32.25, I'll write it larger, and I move that decimal 1 time to the right, I get 322.5. Now this was a money problem, and with money we typically write it with hundredths, so we can fill in a 0, annex a 0 to make it more look like money. So the skimboard costs $322.50. Numbers like 10, 100, and 1,000 are powers of 10. They can be written with exponents with a base of 10. So 10 is equal to 10 to the first power because there's 1 0 in 10. 100 is 10 to the second power. 1,000 is 10 to the third power, etc. To multiply a decimal by a power of 10, move the decimal point to the right the same number of zeros in the power of 10. This is also the same number as the exponent on 10. So here's another example when we have an exponent. Find 24 7/10 times 10 to the second power. So again, they're showing you the long multiplication, and we notice because of these multiplying by zeros, we have these steps here which are kind of silly looking, but we do get our answer at the bottom. The faster way is to move the decimal point. Multiplying a decimal by 100 means that we move the decimal point 2 places to the right. Why 2? Because there are 2 zeros in 100. So if we take 24 7/10 and we move 2 times to the right, you can see we're not going to have actual places, so we can annex a few zeros and get rid of ones we don't need. Now let's hop over to the right twice. Once, twice. We don't need these zeros. This was not a money problem. So we can see we get 2470, which is 2,470. At this point, please work on the guided practice, the independent practice, and if you have time, the problem solving. And if you have any questions, please raise your hand. Thanks and have a great day.